Hi, do you ever wonder how people go viral online and what it is about um, these stories out there that people just go crazy over? Debbie and I have been talking about going about the digital storytelling aspect and what it is that makes people really interested in the various media that we have available to us. So I'd like to say hi to Debbie Ellickson. She's joining me today. This is Virtual Newsmakers, and she is coming in from Edmonton, Canada.
Hello.
Speaking of which, is it freezing there yet?
Yes. Well, it's raining, so I'm always cold. So.
Gotcha.
Hence, I've got two layers of clothing on.
All right, so I just want to get started. We don't have a guest today, but we're actually going to start a series of digital storytelling because we're very fascinated about the different ways that you can use technology to tell the story of your organization and the people in it or whatever it is that you're doing. So, Debbie, you're a publisher, and can you give a little bit of background about what you've been working on recently in terms of your own writing, but also I'd like to hear sort of a framework for telling how you might use today's technology to start to tell the story of what's going on.
Well, actually, I just got this hot off the press from Self Counsel Press, so it does play in a little bit to what we're talking about, publishing and marketing in the digital age. And so this outlines some of the platforms and some of the stuff that we've been talking about on Virtual Newsmakers, on helping you take the story and push it out a bit and customize it to fit whatever your own following is, and how to create a following. But for storytelling, and while I do write mostly nonfiction, storytelling does play a part in any type of communications, whether you're a professional speaker, whether you're a broadcaster, whether you're a sports writer. It doesn't matter what role you're playing. Storytelling helps you get the point across. So I want to coin a line from one of my dear friends who's a certified professional speaker in Canada here, Brian Lee. And he always says this phrase, and I always say it to myself. He says, never tell a story without a point, and never tell a point without a story.
Oh, that's great.
It is, and if you remember that phrase, then it'll help you phrase what you need to say. So I had some notes.
How would you outline that particular thing? Because I think people get writer's block, and storytelling is not just written. But what are the actual elements, and how would you outline that for telling a good story that has a point and making sure that the point actually has a story?
So there are some questions that you can ask yourself about the storytelling process. And one of them is, you need to tell what the story's about, and not necessarily in a 5-minute diatribe. You need to tell what the story's about in one phrase or one sentence.
Okay.
And what happens in the story? What's the theme of it? Why does this story need to be told? And why is it different to another story that might be similar? So you don't have to go very far to see the same story being told, but we can take everybody who's listening to this broadcast or watching this broadcast, and we can take everybody that's out there, and everybody can write the same story.
Yeah, but it won't be the same.
But everybody's going to choose different words and a different phrases to put the story together. And it's how your interpretation of the story comes about is what is your personal copyright. So just because it's the same story doesn't mean, oh, well, Cynthia wrote the same story that I wrote, so she's infringing on my copyright. Well, she's not, because she told the story in her own voice.
In a different perspective.
Yes. And it doesn't have to be print. It can be, you could tell a story with music. You can tell a story visually, like we're doing right now. You can tell a story with photographs. I mean, the adage, the photograph tells 1,000 words, is very true.
A short video could tell 10,000.
Yes, yes. So then if you are, this may even play into nonfiction as well, because you're even if you're talking about toxic waste, there's still people that are involved in the story.
Right.
So when you look at the characters that are in the story, who is guiding it? So who's your main character, or do you have more than one main character that are guiding the story? How do they interact with each other? And if you are looking to use digital platforms to tell the story, how are your characters going to interact with the audience? So, and on the different platforms. And of course, it's one of my absolute favorite programs is Dallas. And so...
Is what?
Dallas.
Dallas. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so Dallas on TNT.
Yeah.
And, when they brought that series back, I don't think there is anybody happier than me in the planet.
I don't think that you hooked me on that too.
So the reason I bring up Dallas is because the way they are doing it, well, I wish the viewership was higher on that program. I'm not sure if they're going to have a season 4, but anyway, that's besides the point. Josh Henderson, who plays John Ross's character,
right?
He has a Facebook page, and so he is in character many times on his posts on his Facebook page. And so as John Ross, he gets a lot of hits on some of the stuff he posts. So that's an example of taking a character from the main story, and using that character. You know that it's a real person. You know that John Ross is the character, and you know that it's Josh Henderson, is the actor that plays John Ross. So there's no shadiness going on. You're not pretending to be somebody you're not, but you're telling the story. You're expanding that story in character, right, in another platform, and you're getting the character actually to tell the story. And I have a friend, Charmaine Hammond, who is actually in Edmonton, and she is also a professional speaker. Her dog Toby is part of her storytelling package. So
I've seen that before. There's a Facebook page that tells the entire story of the dog.
Yeah, Toby's Tales. So she has a Facebook page for her dog Toby, and Toby tells the stories from his perspective. And she goes to speaking engagements with the dog, and they talk to kids and whatnot, and so she's got videos on her YouTube channel, and Toby Tales is a book, and so so that's another example of how somebody can use storytelling and characters to push out their own message. And
well, what you're getting at is more character development. When you leave the people out of the story, that you're not really able to get people on the outside sort of hooked in and connected to what's really going on. I
Yes.
think a lot of businesses will do social media and they'll show sort of the location, or they'll show the products, or they'll show whatever, but they're not really connecting on that deeper level with the people. And I think that the idea of showing those characters, I'll give you an example. I'm in a restaurant right now in Louisiana, and I'm gonna lay it out in a little bit of a different way, because every story, human beings are storytellers by nature, and we've done it all the way back to cavemen painting the stories on the walls, of hunting, and all these things. And history's gotten passed down matrilineally or whatever by verbally through the mouth before anything ever got written at all. So it was images and stories being told around the campfire, so to speak. So it's ingrained deeply in us. I'm at this restaurant right now, and what's interesting about it, it's called the Lake House Restaurant in Mandeville, Louisiana. And it's on the north shore of Lake Pontchartrain, and it literally is on the lake. That is, the situation of it and the location of it is brilliant. And they've got these big verandas, and people can sit outside, and it's overlooking the lake, and there's these beautiful oak trees with moss hanging down from the trees, and the entrance into the space from the parking lot is this arbor with wisteria on it. So it's already just, right off the bat, got a location that's worth sort of framing the story within. And then you come into the restaurant, and I'll give you a story today. They have to get ready every day from, and get everything from the night before moved away. So there's this whole behind the scenes that goes on. All the silverware has to be washed and put into the proper compartments and things like that. I'm talking about the minutia of the behind the scenes. So we walk in today, and there's this really fabulous woman named Jean, and she sits down with my daughter, and they start working. She teaches her how to separate the silverware. And meanwhile, there's this whole choreography of coffee making and chairs being moved and all these things going on behind the scenes that have to happen in the kitchen before any lunch gets served, before any guests come in the door. There's a whole sort of framework, and then there are all these people and personalities involved, and they're all interesting people. And that's before you even get to the food and like the outer world of the storytelling of what goes on in the front of the house of the restaurant. In the front of the house, they've got beautiful flowers on the tables, and they have this lovely Sunday brunch that, if pictures were taken of that brunch, it would just have everybody drooling on their keyboards if they were being put out there. But it's not just about the food. It's about the events that are going on. Last night there was an Alzheimer's event, and then we had music out on the patio. And I could just imagine the thousands of stories going on a daily basis in this one place that maybe never get told. And it's not something that happens just on a website. And that's what's going on right now. Is I'm in this very rich place, and yet the only thing that's being told is the occasional Facebook post and an occasional Twitter picture here and there, and this static website that never really changes because it's too complicated to change. And yet at the same time, I think if people knew in the local area all the stories that were going on a daily basis in this place, I think there wouldn't be a seat open in the house.
It's funny. It's funny because since I left Phoenix, I had in the back of my mind an idea for might be a screenplay or a book, a fiction book, and taking the room of a motel, just one room, room 143, or which is the room I stayed in, this one motel,
Right.
and just taking the one room and the stories of the people that came and went out of that room.
Well, I have to tell you, do you know of Jim Jarmusch? He's this kooky filmmaker, and he's just brilliant. And I think it was called Mystery Train, and he shows this one hotel in Memphis, Tennessee, where various people from around the world come to this one hotel on the way to Graceland to see. They're all Elvis fans, and every one of them has a really different story, and then each one of the rooms has a different story. And so you're dealing with this location and the characters and how they're intertwined with one another, exactly like what you're talking about. And then another one that he does is he has a cab ride in each one of the cities around the world. So there's a cab ride that happens in Rome at the exact same time as a cab ride that happens in Stockholm, and then New York City, and then Los Angeles, and they're all happening at the same time, but their time difference gets shown in this movie. But he's focusing on the place and the characters. And so would you say that place and character are the most important elements in telling the story?
Oh, yeah, it is a very important factor, and it just, you're describing that takes me back to when I was sports writing in the NHL, and my approach, I have done the game day, the post-game stuff, which is all right, I guess, but I like the one-on-one, sitting down and getting a little more deeper behind the story. And I remember one player got traded. I can't remember which player it was, and he got traded to Dallas or some team, and he was in town, and in the locker room there, all these guys, reporters are standing around him talking about, oh, what's your new role on the team going to be? All the typical post-trade stories. And
right.
So I waited through the scrum, and I waited till everybody was done the question, and I said, okay, enough of that. I says, how do you get your stuff from A to B? So I wanted to know, okay, he was in one city one night, he's in another city the other night, and he's on the road to boot. So how do you move? Because once you're done, that team has nothing to do with you. They're not going to help you move or anything. Yeah. You're on your own. So if you're not married and you don't have a wife behind to pack up your stuff, if you have a dog, what do you do? So I wanted to get that perspective, and
that's interesting.
So I wanted to know more about the behind the scenes stuff.
Right.
And I think I like that approach to just about any industry, whether it's especially, the restaurant and sports. You want to know what makes stuff tick behind the scenes.
Right. Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, because I would never have thought to ask that particular question. So you brought your unique perspective into that moment. And even if you took every character that's in this restaurant and you had them tell their story of the day, and they only got 5 minutes to do it, but they chose a different vantage point, they're all going to see things differently, and they're all going to tell so can you imagine the bricolage and the richness of what could be going out there? And yet, they could hire a social media manager that isn't really connected to what's really going on here, but are the stories really going to get told? And you know what I'm saying? And anybody can take a 5-minute breakout if they know, that they could be part of the storytelling process. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yes, but one of the things that is very difficult for most people, okay, I sit down and say, okay, Cynthia, tell me a story.
Right.
Tell me your story. And you'll go blank. You'll say, well, what does she want to know? And well, my life is boring. Most people say, well, my life is boring. Nothing happens to me. So that's where the reporter skills come in. Is you have to kind of figure out how to dig deep and find that story. And I actually worked on a book project for the Calgary Booster Club, and it was years ago, and it was their 50-year history. And this is a club that not only shaped amateur sports in the city, they were the catalysts that brought in the 1988 Olympic Winter Games to Calgary. So as a result of that, it brought in the facilities. It's the reason why the NHL is a Saddle Dome and all sorts of things. And then, so the book was documenting the history of the club, but also showing their legacy to the city and to sports. So part of the process of doing that book was I had to speak with some of the people that were members and try to, and some of these people have been members for a very long time, 30, 40 years.
Right.
I mean, they bleed for this club. If without people like this, you just don't have organizations that do this. And plus, they give money back to sport in the city is what they do. So getting the stories out of these people was probably the hardest gig of all, because they didn't want to talk about themselves. They weren't doing it for themselves. And they were, a lot of them were private people. So my goal was I had to really push to cull stories out of them that, how I phrased it was, tell me an incident or tell me an example of something that you experienced regarding the Booster Club that honed your belief in the club and told you that, and really cemented why you're doing this, why you're involved, like why you spend so much time. So, you know, they'll talk about some athletes and something that happened with an athlete, like they funded an athlete to go to a certain tournament, and just the result of what that feeling was and how the athlete felt about that. So they'll tell little stories like that, and that's what I was looking for. So sometimes, my point is that sometimes it's not real easy to get those stories out of people.
Okay, so
it's really hard.
Yeah, in advance you have to have sort of the leading questions developed. Let me ask you this. Okay, let's say there's 10 storytellers in a place, or 20, and they all have their different unique perspectives. And what do you think about developing a jar or a series of content ideas that they draw from to get inspiration, you know, little inspiration points? I can't think of an idea today, so let me just draw something and have a little fun with this.
Yeah, I love that idea. In fact, that's another thing I've used in some of my manuscript development classes. Is I'll just at random pick a photograph of something anywhere that I found on the web, and I'll put it up on the screen, and I'll say, okay, everybody take 5 minutes and write a paragraph about what you see in the story. What's the story behind this picture? And you'll get all these different perspectives, and it's quite unique. So sometimes, you know, writer's block can be a real it is a real thing.
Not just about writing, because maybe someone's good with the camera, or maybe somebody likes to do video. I mean, you mentioned it, and what we're talking about is content. How do you tell a story? Is it visually? Is it video? Is it audio? Is it interviewing somebody and just getting their audio, or is it doing a little videotape of the guy playing the music out in the courtyard and letting people know about that?
It's all of the above.
Yeah.
It's whatever format you feel most comfortable in telling the story. Because if you're dyslexic, you don't want to write.
Right.
If you're dyslexic, you want to tell it visually, like probably audio or video cam, or photograph. If you're, you might have some sort of disability, or I don't really like the word disability, but you may have some sort of physical aspect that you might not be able to do something that somebody else, like if you don't have any arms, maybe you have to use your feet to write or something. So you would use the tools that you most feel comfortable with and that you can use to
I'm not talking about making everybody doing it. I'm talking about, what if I gave you a 5 to 10 minute break and you went out and you told the story of the day, or just take some time and just show the world something. The other thing that I was thinking is that, we've got these shows like Kitchen Nightmares and all these like funny things, and you know what? I have been dealing with the restaurant industry for 15 years, and they all have funny behind the scenes stories. They have nightmares that happen every day. They have problems that happen, and these problems are almost a microcosm for life, and how these problems get solved could be interesting in and of themselves, even just, to the industry. So I could see a whole series of stories identifying a common problem and then the solution to the problem, or here's what we did to solve that problem, that could become, wildly popular.
Or just a book of the funny stories.
Yeah.
I have an author, Dave Rackman, who was a Safeway manager, and he had funny storyteller, and he had all these stories from working at Safeway, just the behind the scenes stuff of all crazy stuff that would happen. So he had these little vignettes, and he threw them in a book, and wildly popular story.
I had the opportunity to meet and befriend, if you will, on several occasions, Daniel Boulud, and he's a very famous French chef in New York, and he's now got restaurants all over the world. And really early on, a lot of the times I was in the kitchen and I saw the behind the scenes of what was going on, and then all of a sudden he'd go through that swinging door, and he was this completely another personality out in the front of the house. He was charming and enchanting and everything about the food, and then he'd go right back through that swinging kitchen door and he'd turn into that 4-star general, like shouting and like telling everybody what to do. And if a plate came in with too much food on it, he wanted to know why. And as I watched this whole thing going on, I was like, this is better than an opera. Somebody needs to make a modern day movie out of the, two personalities between the back of the house and the front of the house.
But you know what? That's still the linear aspect of the restaurant. How about digging deeper? Okay, so what does this restaurant serve? So if it serves shrimp, okay, what about the shrimp boat that the shrimp came from, and the stories behind the shrimper who runs the boat, or the so take it even deeper, or take it even before that, the shrimp and how they where they came from to get into the net, to get into the boat, or even the pelicans. I've got a picture in Corpus Christi with the shrimp boat coming into dock, and oh my God, I have never seen so many birds, like, shoo, in all my life, and there must have been like 100 birds, gulls, and pelicans, all just waiting for this guy to unload his catch. And one guy, every time he turned his back, this pelican would go in there and steal, and steal.
That's a great little vignette.
Those are little stories that you don't see in the restaurant, but they're part of the restaurant.
Right. Well, and I think when you're in the middle of it, you don't even see it all anymore. You're just so in the middle of this dance that you're no longer, the audience anymore. You get lost in the story in such a way that you can't even tell it anymore. So it's a really fascinating, I look around here and there's the behind the scenes, there are the events that are going on, there's the location that is very interesting, there are the people. They have off-site events with dealing with the movie industry and music industry that all have interesting things going on. They've got music that they're
Come on, Cynthia, you can't sit here and not tell, unless it's a secret, you can't sit here and tell me that one band's name and then not say it on the air and get everybody going nuts.
Yesterday they catered an event, well, not like the production of a video that's being shot down here, I guess, for One Direction. So they've got a concert here or something. So yeah, the reality of the matter is there's these really incredible stories and things that are going on that the world really needs to know about. There are funny moments. There's art around here. There's food. There's recipes. I mean, I could go on for 2 hours, and then how that gets showed, is it videos, is it pictures, is it, and then how it gets distributed, because nobody, you got to create the content, and then you got to distribute it and really connect to the people that are involved in it. And so you can't just hire a social media manager to just pump out messages that say, Sunday brunch special and whatever, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's got to be this consistent, inside story, I think.
Each recipe has a story behind it, how it came about.
Absolutely.
There's no excuse for a restaurant, whether it's digital or physical. I mean, even if they took their photocopier and printed off copies and log bound them, there's no excuse for a restaurant if they have great menus and great, why they shouldn't have at the counter before people leave their establishment a cookbook that they can buy, that they can take home with them.
Or an online version. I mean, really, seriously, there is a mystique already about Louisiana cuisine that is world-renowned. I mean, we know how to cook and eat down here, and that right there is a sexy draw. I mean, how do you tap into all the sexy that's going on in a place? And I think what happens is people stop seeing it going on around them. It's just because they're not able to tap into all the flavors of what's really going on around them, and that's what people really want to see and hear. They want to feel the colors and the flavors and almost smell the everything. I mean, so really in a lot of ways I could see a lot happening here. I think the common excuse that I hear with every business, not restaurants, but every business and every client is, I don't have time.
Yes.
And I want to counter that every time with, if Richard Branson can run 32 companies, and fly all over the world and still manage to do his social media and all that he does online, hello, that excuse of I don't have time to do this just falls flat with me. I can't buy into that. So I think just people aren't in the habit of it. Now, he does have content managers helping to move the message once he gets it done, but he is the leader of the voice of Virgin, all the Virgin brand. And I can't wait to see what he's got going on each day. I mean, yesterday decided that everybody has unlimited vacation time. that was yesterday's story. Everybody works for Virgin no longer has 2 weeks of vacation, but they get to determine it. And the reason is he's decided that people, if they love what they're doing, aren't going to count the number of days that they're on or off. So anyway, to me, So we need to sum this up, and I want to take on a challenge that I would like for you. You're in Canada, and you know nothing about where I am. What would you challenge
Or, you mean in Louisiana or in Miami?
right now in Louisiana?
In Louisiana, I don't. Well, I know Lake Pontchartrain, of course. I know a little bit about New Orleans. Hey, I watch football, Cynthia, so I know about the Saints and who dat. But being a Falcons fan, nobody really wants to hear.
Can you see or feel where I am? I'm sitting in an office right now that is extremely nondescript.
Yeah.
Does it feel like I'm in the midst of this?
It does not feel like you're in the midst of probably a culture, one of the best cultural environments probably in America, I would say.
Okay, so I'm going to take on the challenge today of uploading stories that I can capture to try to see if you can get a feel for, if I can tell you the story about where I am, and I'm going to upload them into this particular show.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And we're going to, and then if you can help me move that story, I think it'd be interesting to see what happens, like how does it get turned into tweets, and how does it hit Facebook? If we could just play with the storytelling process, will you join me in this for the next couple of days?
That sounds like fun.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to get the content together and get the stories together, and you're going to help me out with the other, with telling me what you need to know more of, or what you want to know more of, or what you're willing to share and find out about, or...
Sounds great.
Okay, awesome. Well, this has been fun, as always. I love chatting with you. We're going to do a whole series of how to use digital formats and digital media to tell stories, businesses, and we are certainly open to people's ideas, questions, or anything that may come up. So my battery's about to run out on my computer, and anyway, so I will see you next week, and this is Virtual Newsmakers, bringing to you different stories on how people are using digital media to tell their story to the world. Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.